Well, hello there, class, and welcome to what is now, I guess, the second day of Unit 5, or I guess Module 5, whatever you want to refer to it as. We are halfway through our semester, believe it or not, and you're doing just a phenomenal work. Been so impressed by the writing styles, the abilities, kind of the thought processes that have gone into everything that we've looked at so far. And again, you're gathering that this is a unique course, right? You're reading, I think these incredibly rich texts. You're looking at the LibTech content. You're looking at these questions, which I'll be posting some answers to those questions. Both this week's questions and responses to LibTech readings, as well as last units. I'll probably do 2 of those videos. And the Schwen and Bass readings, some great content there that's really fun for me to read. Your dialogue. It's interesting. I'm teaching at a different university at the same time as teaching this course, completely different content. And you can tell the difference in kind of the engagement in the online classroom when someone is taking just one class and someone is taking multiple classes. And so I know that in this course, some of you are taking 12, 15, 18, I don't even know how you do that units at the graduate level. That just boggles my mind. So kudos to you. And I realize that there's challenges in getting the reading done and getting your response written and engaging with your classmates and all of those things. But I want to encourage you, push through. It will be totally worth it. One of the great things about the online classroom is there's a number of great things, but I would say one in particular is that there are, I'm sure, in a class the size of ours, there are students who their inclination, their proclivities are toward introversion versus that of extroversion. So here we are in this class. I think we talked about this, but I asked the initial question on a Sunday, or on a Monday, I guess it would be, and you then have until a full week later to respond to that question. If we're in class and let's say I'm teaching face-to-face and I ask a question and I want to hear from it, because I do, I love hearing from students, you have to think kind of on the spot. You have to respond as quickly as you can. But here you have the time to think about how you're going to respond. I also love that it allows an opportunity for us to engage in thoughtful dialogue in the written word, because as you know, I'm sure full well, that we communicate differently in the spoken word, and we communicate differently in the written word, right? So when we're writing something, for those of us who are more, our preference is more towards extroversion, we just open our mouth and start talking. And we sometimes, and I'm saying weeks, this is me, we sometimes don't put nearly as much thought or consideration into what it is that we're saying, and we just start talking. Well, when you have to write, you have to think about what you're going to say. You have to figure out, how am I going to format this? What order do I want my words to come out in, right? How do I want this to be kind of processed through my thinking out of my mouth, so to speak, and into my fingers onto the page? And so it allows for, I would even argue, a deeper sense of learning to take place in an online classroom the more engaged we are in the discussions. There's the peer-to-peer learning, right? There's the course facilitation that's taking place that I get to lend my hand in, right, as the university professor of record. I'm facilitating the content, kind of putting things together in such a way that I'm hopefully making sense for you in your learning processes as we walk through this together, right? And then you jump in and you engage. And so this week we've got some great content from Schwen and Bass, and I'm really looking forward to hopping in and kind of eavesdropping, if you will, into the conversations that are taking place. In the midst of all that, I say that again, realizing that you're taking so many units. Again, my hope is, my desire is that this is really kind of this almost a reprieve, as I've mentioned before, from the rest of your coursework, a bit of a rest, where you feel rested, you feel rejuvenated. There's almost even a sense of maybe Sabbath or extra dose of peace that takes place when you are able and willing to fully engage in the content. You can sit and you can read and you can think maybe even using a different part of your brain to process content. So I hope you're finding great value in this. I'm finding great value in what you're sharing. Just as a heads up, next week is going to be a little bit of next unit's a different week, a different unit. I'm actually going to ask you, of course, to read the content, but I'm not going to ask you to engage in discussion with your classmates, and it'll make more sense. But I'm asking for you to kind of dig deep a little bit and look for some examples of career development in some non-career development related areas, at least directly related. There's obviously textbooks out there, but what is there, magazine articles and TED Talks, and maybe you read a work of fiction, and in that book you found this excerpt that you thought, man, that just speaks so perfectly to the career development process. Whatever the case is. So again, you'll have even more reprieve as you just kind of have to think through your own response, but don't have to engage in discussion with your fellow classmates here in a couple of weeks. And that's going to be in our next unit, Unit 6. So yeah, keep up the great work. We got some good discussions, Schwein and Bass. We're looking this week at, I think, some really important content. We've moved kind of into a very practical approach to career counseling. So now we're looking at strategies and techniques. And I think that you will find some helpful strategies and techniques in the content that we're looking at, right? So Tang, I think, has done a masterful job at kind of helping us think through some of these techniques. I mean, this course, after all, is titled Career Development Theories and Techniques, right? So what are some of the strategies and the techniques that you engage in? I think there was even some questions in this last unit, in Unit 4, asking specifically about what kind of approaches or techniques or assessments or interventions could you use in career development? And I think this unit and the reading that we have from Tang will help us to think through some of that content. We'll also look at information technology and career information. And so what role does tech play within the field and practice of career development, career counseling, and so forth, right? And then we've got ethical issues. We've got a couple articles. There's 3 of them. So story crafting strategies. So strategies for facilitating narrative career counseling. So some of you may be familiar with narrative therapy and the beauty of storytelling and kind of how that kind of helps to flesh out some of the things for us to work through. Then we look at some ethical issues in the design and use of internet-based career assessment. And this is a really interesting topic for us to consider and explore. And what role do we play? And I'll talk more about that probably at the end of this unit as we move into the next unit, because I don't want to kind of taint the way that you view this. So how would you then think about the role of technology? What about online assessments? What about using internet tools and different things that are available to clients? And when is that maybe appropriate, and when is it not appropriate? So that's a really important aspect for us to consider. And then there's resume therapy and vocational test feedback. Case study number 5, it's really brief as far as the questions go. I think you've done a great job in responding to those. Some of you, again, may have heard, just a few more, hey, I'd like to go a little bit more in depth. So what would you do after this structured interview? Give us some really kind of thorough, robust responses to this, and how would you help Anne to develop a plan for her next move? Okay, so think through those questions, and that's going to be on pages 212 to 213 out of the Tang text. And then in addition to the case study, we have exercise number 3. Okay, you're going to create a genogram. Okay, and it talks about that in the text on pages 217 to 218. And I want you to kind of follow the example that's given. So you'll see there's a picture. So what I want you to do in your response is I want you to answer the questions, and then I want you to create a genogram. And I've given you an example of what a genogram could look like. If you just go online and Google genogram, or you refer to what's talked about in the text, you should have a pretty easy way of creating that. Some of you, I shouldn't say you, but some students in the past have had issues with uploading the documents. So here's what I would ask you to do. Save the created genogram. Whether you do it by hand and take a picture and save it as a picture, or you do it, in some sort of word art, something in Microsoft Word, or maybe you use Pages, or you use Adobe or something that you've created with, and then save it as a picture, and you can copy and paste the picture into the body of your response. So I want to see it. I want to see what you're working on, right? So I want the creativity to shine, to come out. And I think much like our written word communicates perhaps sometimes different things than our spoken word does, I think the drawn kind of the narrative component, right? Not necessarily narrative, but the illustrated, there it is, the illustrated component sometimes speaks differently to what our words, even written on paper or spoken, or especially thought, can communicate. So I want to see it in both ways, okay? So it'll make more sense once you get in there and you see what I'm talking about with a genogram, all right? So you get your case study, you have your exercise, and then of course you have your LipTak 321, which will come from chapters 3 through 7. And again, please remember what we're looking at here is I want you to come up with 3 questions. Be robust in your response, thorough, thoughtful, robust. 3 questions or 3 things you learned in this week's reading, this unit's reading. Units 3 through 7, okay? The chapters that are assigned. I'm sorry, 5 through 6. I was reading the wrong numbers. You're reading 5 through 6. What are 3 things you learned in chapters 5 and 6 of LipTak? What are 2 questions you have from those 2 chapters, 5 and 6? And what's 1 immediately actionable or applicable application idea that you've taken away, okay? So there's lots of things you could write about related to the course. Think about how they connect to the course, of course, but what I'm really looking for is the content that comes specifically from LipTak, okay? So there's what we have this week. Looking forward to your engaged discussions. Should be great. If you have any questions, of course, feel free to reach out to me. Send me an email, send me a note through Canvas. But you're doing a great job. Keep it up. I'll have your grades posted and updated here by the end of the week. Any questions or concerns, feel free to get in touch. If not, have a great rest of your week. But, don't be a stranger. Feel free to ask whatever question you have or let me know if you're struggling with something. Remember that your LipTak 321 response is due at the end of the first week of the unit, okay? So if it comes in after, there is a chance you may not get credit. I might be willing to give partial credit, but that needs to be done by the end of the first week of the unit, as does your initial post for the Schwen and Bass discussion, and then everything else. Your engaged discussion responses, your case study, and your Tang exercise are all due by the end of the second week of the unit. All right? Any questions, let me know. If not, have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you online.